welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to a new reading vlog, and today is Saturday, so I decided to vlog it, but I also have some specific prompt in mind to kind of organize my reading for this vlog, so we'll get to that in a second. Before we get to that, I have books. I did a haul like 2 videos back, and already I have a couple books more, so expect a new book haul soon-ish. Either way, I was still expecting this package, so I thought it would be fun to show them to you. First off, I have Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee. I have a plan for this book for when I'll read this book, but this sounds so interesting. If you've never heard of this is kind of a heist. It says right here, Ocean's 11 meets The Farewell in Portrait of a Thief, a lush lyrical heist novel inspired by the true story of Chinese art vanishing from Western museums, about diaspora, the colonization of art, and the complexity of the Chinese American identity. Apart from Six of Crows, I don't think I've ever read a heist novel, so this is not fantasy, this is real world. I don't know if this is supposed to be historical or if this is supposed to be like present day. I'm not sure. I'll figure it out once I get to it. But either way, a heist novel sounds incredible. And also, I have one that I have been meaning to get for ages. This is The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali, and I've just heard amazing things. So this is supposed to be a love story that takes place over a long period of time and over multiple countries, so that has me really intrigued. I do have to say though about this book that I do not love, if you can see that, when books have the deckled edges. I'm not the biggest fan. This is not comfortable to read and to flip the pages, and it's a stylistic choice that I don't really approve of. I'm sorry if you love it, great for you. There are a ton of books nowadays that have this. I just don't love it. I prefer the pages to be all one length. Thank you very much. Those are the 2 books that I got. Now that the mini book haul is done, I am going to talk to you about the kind of prompt that I am trying to fulfill for this reading vlog, and that is to read the shortest books on my TBR, on my physical TBR, because I do have some of them that I acquired recently, and I feel like I haven't been really having that much time to read lately. That makes me really, really sad. I feel like I'm missing stories in my life, new stories, new ideas, and I need new books in my life. Not to buy more books, but to actually read more books. And so I decided that the best thing to do would be to dedicate myself and this vlog to reading short books. Not only am I really in the mood to get to more stories, but also I want to explore reading shorter books because I know I tend to love bigger books because we get more time with the characters, we get to explore them better and to really fall in love with them. I usually tend to pick up fantasy, so those books also tend to be longer, and so it's very rare for me to pick up like novels that are not that long. Graphic novels, absolutely. Manga, I'll absolutely pick that up, but novels, don't really read that many that are short. But recently I acquired some that I thought would be good to read in this vlog. So let's go to my TBR bookshelf. Here we are, and I'm going to show you the possible books that I have. So the first one that I already started reading last night, but I read 5 pages of it, literally 5 pages of it. And that is Before the Coffee Gets Cold, because I'm just so intrigued about this book. I know nothing about it, just the premise sounds so mysterious that I got this one recently and I definitely had to pick this one up. So this will be the first one that I get to, but I have some others to add to this one. So the first one that I have is this one that I also hauled recently, and this will definitely be read because it is the shortest, objectively speaking, book on my TBR. I've loved Nevo's writing in the past, so I'm expecting to love this one. It's fantasy, so it's something new that I've never read before. A very short fantasy novella, so I'm curious about this one. The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Niveau. Then I have a new edition. This is Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. You're getting a sneak peek into my future book haul, and I've just, for some reason, this series was never something that appealed to me because it focuses so much on the kids. So if you've never read the premise of this series, you have kids that have gone into magical worlds, like think Alice in Wonderland and Wendy from Peter Pan, stuff like that. Kids from our normal everyday world that somehow got themselves in these magical, fantastical worlds, and now they are back on Earth, but they would like to go back to the other world. And so we have this character who kind of gives them a chance to do that, if I understand that correctly. But it is Seanan McGuire, and recently, I don't remember which book in the series because there are, I think, 7 or 8 out. They are all very short novellas, but there are quite a few of them. But one of them sounded incredible, and so I decided to take a chance and buy the first one and see what I think about it. Then I have down here a complete mystery to me, The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enriquez. I know nothing about this book. I know that it's short. I know that this was shortlisted for the International Booker Prize. I've heard good things about it. Then I also have, this is definitely bigger. Piranesi by Susanna Clark. Yeah, this is definitely bigger than those, so I won't be reading it in this vlog. I also have this one, but I think this one is kind of like Piranesi because it's short, but it's not as short as the other ones. 239. But this one I think it might be. This is La Petite Mort by Olivia Blake, and this one is 205 pages. So let me put them in order. Here they are in order, and because I kind of already started with the longer one, I'll definitely get to this one. I'll continue on with this. And then I don't really know if I will be able to read all of these. Check out the next clip and you'll see what I get to. So like I mentioned before, I had started reading Before the Coffee Gets Cold last night, and I read a couple more pages. I'm currently on page 30, but I have already some thoughts. So you remember that thing I mentioned that I didn't really understand what not the premise, because the premise I don't really understand it yet. I'm really in the very beginning, but we have been introduced to the concept of this time-traveling coffee shop, and what we have understood, or what I have understood so far, is that we have a lot of rules. We have a lot of rules, like you have to be in a seated in a specific place, in a specific chair in the coffee shop, and you can go back in time, but you can only kind of interact with people who have been to the coffee shop before. You can only go back in time, but you can't change the past. Like, there's so many rules that supposedly you have to follow, or that are just included in this time-traveling business. And what is funny is that the character that we are following in the first chapter, I don't know if she will remain our main character or if things will change, but I'm guessing that our main characters and the POVs we have access to will change depending on the chapter. So our main character in the first chapter is very much us, the reader, understanding this for the first time, because she had read somewhere that some years ago this coffee shop was very popular, and that People were very intrigued by it, and they used to line up to go there because there was this story going around that you could time travel, but then you never got to see people who actually time traveled and stuff like that. So it's become kind of an urban legend. Excuse me if you hear noise in the background. My neighbors love to workshop and DIY during the weekend. So if you hear construction noise or anything of the sort, I'm so sorry. I will try to be brief with my updates at this time. I don't know if it's my favorite writing style because I feel a disconnect from the characters. I understand where our main character so far is coming from, and we already have been introduced to a ton of characters, which was very bizarre. This almost felt like a fantasy story in the sense that page 30 we are already introduced to 6 different characters, but I feel like the way that this is written kind of holds me at arm's length, and I feel like I don't really get to fully know the characters because we're very to the point with this writing style. It's a little weird. It's a little weird. And then I also started The Empress of Salt and Fortune, and this is very short. I looked on Script and they had the audiobook available, so that's what I'm reading. This has, like I mentioned in my book haul, a storyteller kind of character named Rabbit, which is really funny. And I thought that that aspect of the story would go over well, pair well with reading the audiobook, and it does incredibly well. Also, this is a very interesting experience reading about this whole new world, a fantasy world, but having so few pages to explore it and to really understand it, because usually you learn all of these names and all of these beings and stuff like that, everything that comes with a fantasy universe, but you have a ton of pages to get used to it. Here I forget most of the names because it's just we get a new name and a new name and a new name, and it's very, very fast. But I am really enjoying the writing style, and so far the story feels a little bit, if you've read The Priory of the Orange Tree, it has certain similarities. Obviously completely different stories. That one is 800 pages, this one is 100 pages, so completely different purposes to both of these books, but it feels similar. Also, I did a poll on Instagram to see what people would be interested to see in terms of the books that I have here, especially because I have not announced that I'm doing a reading vlog or anything. It's just interesting. So most people, which is interesting to me, want me to read this one, which is self-published. Olivia Blake is really big right now, but still this is not her most popular book, but still most people want me to read this one, which I'll definitely get to. And the other ones are split, the other 2 most voted are split between the 2 that I am already currently reading. And what I was very surprised with is that nobody has voted for me to read this, which I was expecting to get the most amount of votes because it's the most popular book after the coffee, before the coffee gets cold, I think. Like, these are the most recognizable and the most popular, so I'm very surprised. So it is quite some time later, it is already nighttime, and I finished the first book, The Empress of Salt and Fortune. Today has been very, very busy. I had a little bit of time to read during the afternoon, but things at work have changed a little bit, so I'll be working from home for the foreseeable future. And so I needed to get my workspace ready for that. I'm hoping to get it fixed by tomorrow, hopefully. But, reading update. I finished this one. I mentioned before that I decided to pick up the audiobook, and I think that was why I flew through it so quickly, because I really do love listening to audiobooks. I really do. And it just makes my brain feel engaged and present in a way that sometimes reading certain books physically doesn't. And I think that was the case with this one. We don't really explore too much of the world. If you are a person that loves to just dip in and out of a world, this is perfect because you get a sense of a full story here, even though it is very fast-paced. But I was missing some character development. Some characters were well explored, well explained, and interesting, but they were always a little bit out of my reach in terms of connection. I enjoyed this one. I would say it's an average reading experience for me. Small interruption, suddenly I have my home office almost kind of ready, so yay. But that also means that I lost my train of thought. So I do not remember where I was, what I was saying. This very much focuses on the Empress story and on her life and her conquest and all of that. So if you enjoy that, the vibes of this book really reminded me of two others, two completely different books, especially in terms of size. But because this feels like just dipping your toes in the water, if you want something with a little more pages, with a little more world building and character studies and all of that, I have recommendations for you. So first off, I have Descendant of the Crane by Joan He. This feels very similar in the sense that we have this empress kind of character. We have a princess in this case, and she also goes through a very interesting journey. Different, but interesting nonetheless. And I think you can see some parallels. Her relationship with ministers and the advisors and all of these other different people that help rule the kingdom. Very similar dynamics, very interestingly explored. So if you enjoy that aspect of the story, I think you should give this one a chance as well. This is YA fantasy. And adult fantasy, we have this one, The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. And this one reminded me of The Empress of Salt and Fortune because of the relationship between Rabbit and the Empress herself. This has a very wide cast of characters, but one of the elements that is very much explored in this book is a relationship between this queen and this... It feels similar to Rabbit in the sense that she is an apprentice to someplace else, and then she's kind of placed within the palace to further political agendas and all of that. This is high fantasy, so there's a lot of political intrigue in here as well, but the whole world, the whole mythology is slightly different, but has points of contact. This was an incredible fantasy, and I'm getting the urge to reread it. So who knows one day, because this is not a short book. The first time I read it, it took me a month. So it'll be a task for another day. That was the reading for today, really. Now I need to take off my makeup, get into my pajamas because I'm tired. I'm tired today. And I'm hoping to get some reading done. Once again, I went on script. There is an audiobook, and I think possibly listening to the story, or maybe just the beginning of the story, will get me more in the vibes and the world of this. So perhaps I will enjoy it more, and then I'll want to read on physically. And then it's really anybody's guess. But all of this is stuff for tomorrow. I have some updates. So the last book I was currently reading was Before the Coffee Gets Cold. So let's start with this one. I have completely changed my mind about this book because if you remember the first time I talked about it, I felt a little about it because the beginning felt a little clunky, but I have to say that my problems have been solved because I don't see that anymore. This book has developed in a way that is so captivating, so interesting, and the writing has changed a little bit as well. I have to say that if you've read this book, or if you've picked up this book but never read it all the way through, keep on going, give it another chance, because I still feel that the first like 20-30 pages are a bit clunky. I think we don't begin with the strongest character or the most compelling character until we get to know her later on in her chapter, because the very beginning feels a little whatever, and it feels like something that's been done before, something that we've seen before. But then you get to know the side characters, and they kind of become the main characters in this story. So as the chapters go on, you'll get to know them better. And this, even though it is a full-length novel, this feels like short stories, because each new chapter kind of introduces us to a new character and their story. But it's not short stories because they are regular clients of this cafe. So we've seen them before, we just get to explore their POV. I'm enjoying this one so much. I could have finished this on Sunday, but I really wanted to save the last chapter for when I was doing this update. Like everybody says, this is a very quiet book, a very mellow book, because there's not a ton of drama, and the first chapter really like sets the whole scene. But I think the most interesting aspects of this story are explored in the following chapters. If you like character exploration, if you like no drama, if you like just low stakes, this is very much the book for you, because it's everyday life, everyday people. I think this book deals wonderfully with topics such as grief and just contentment a little bit, because we see and we come to these characters during some difficult situation, and for one reason or another they would like to go back in time. But with those time travels, they don't really have that sense of, oh, I want to keep going back. They have a sense of closure, and they really look their future head on with a different light. And I think that's such a beautiful message to have. It's almost like they want to go back to critical moments and do them better, but move on from that. I cannot wait to see what the last chapter is about. I think I kind of know where this is going, but still, I'm really invested in this. Then I started The Dangers of Smoking in Bed, and I was right in the sense that it is a short story collection. It says right there, stories. What I did not anticipate was the fact that this is supposedly horror. How many times have I said that I do not enjoy horror stories, that I do not enjoy reading horror or that genre in anything, movies, books, anything. Tell me why I bought this book, because I cannot. This is really the problem with me not reading the backs of books and synopsis or anything. It's just like the vibes that the cover gives me and the recommendations. Like sometimes people give reviews and recommendations of certain books and they don't really specify the genre or what really takes place in it, and that's fine by me, because they have specific things that they say that really catch my eye, and I'm like, ooh, that sounds interesting, I want to read that. And then shit like this happens. I've read 5 pages of this. Like, I read the first story and already I'm like, ooh, this is not a good idea. But I'll still give it a chance, because I do really love to read outside my comfort zone and just give myself the chance to like something new and something that is unexpected that I don't really know too much about. So I'm going to keep on reading this, but I reserve the right to DNF it or to skip a few stories if I get like spooked. It's okay so far. Don't really have many thoughts. And then I have La Petite Mort, which I also started yesterday night, and this one is very much more my vibe. This is, I read 30 pages of this, but I can see this going by very quickly. This is a novella, and So far, we're just setting the stage, but already I'm liking the vibes. So we have two sisters who are in New Orleans because their grandmother kind of left them an inheritance. She died, she passed away, and she said that one of those sisters would be entitled to her home. Like, the sisters have to decide whoever wants to get the home, because in order to get it, they have to follow a ton of different rules and stipulations and all of that. So one of the sisters is like, she has her life all set up. She does not need this kind of energy. She is a lawyer. So the sisters decide that one of them is going to kind of do whatever, and the other one is taking on the responsibility of this inheritance. And what we see, or the little bit that I read so far, is that that sister, what's her name, Marissa, going to that house and immediately seeing some very odd things, because New Orleans has this vibe of mysticism and magic and vampires and all of this lore and stories. And she goes into the house and immediately something is off. Not horror off, but something is off. And she is like trying to do a tour of the house, see where everything goes, what is where. And then there's a random man in her house just making a sandwich who doesn't really know who she is. She obviously doesn't know who he is, even though he is inside of her home. And it's through him that she discovers that because she took on this inheritance and she followed all of these rules, she is now a caretaker for characters of the supernatural of New Orleans. Sounds good, and I like that already, like 30 pages in out of 200 and something, 205, we already know so much. The pieces have been set in this chessboard, and it was so brilliantly done because you have a little bit of info dump, but it's so quick and it is so well done that it's not dragging the story. I am very curious to see like what relationships are going to develop, what's the point of this story. So yeah, those are the updates. I'll come back to you when I finish, before the coffee gets cold. And I mean, I'll keep on reading this, but it may take me a little bit. I finished before the coffee gets cold, and it went where I thought it would go. This is not a very plot twisty kind of book. It's a very comforting read, and so it goes where you expect it to go, and it does what you hope it will do, and it was exactly that. This book ended on a very sweet note, and I can definitely understand why it's like an international bestseller and why everyone loves it, because it's short, it's sweet, and it has those kinds of like universal messages that makes you rethink life a little bit and how you live. So this was really, really enjoyable. I don't know if I will read the one that comes after this, the Tales from the Cafe, because while I really enjoyed this one, I've heard that that one is more of the same thing, and most people enjoy the first one better. So I don't know if it'll be something that I pick up in the future, but I'm really happy with this experience. Definitely check it out. And now on to the next one. It's a new day and I finished a new book, so let's talk about it. I finished La Petite Mort by Olivia Blake, and unfortunately this was a bit of a disappointment. I think I mentioned in a previous clip that the beginning was very promising, and it was. I think it was very compelling, the way the characters were introduced, the way that the stage was set, let's put it like that. But then I didn't vibe with the whole story, and there were some pieces missing for me, at least for me. This may be your new favorite thing, so let's talk about it. My main problem with this book is that we jump into these relationships, but we don't have a lot of backstory, and we don't really have enough information for me to be invested in what happens and there's no stakes for me because I don't really feel for these characters. And I don't know if it was a thing of this story because it was short, if it was just the way that the world was explored, because there are certain books that are short, but you immediately fall in love with the characters and you immediately know where they're coming from and their relationships are believable and all of that. But that was not the case with this one. So the stakes were immediately high and things were happening. This was very fast-paced, but to me it felt like we were overdoing it. This was not the book for me. I didn't hate it by any means. The writing was still enjoyable. I've read other books by this author before and I've enjoyed them much more, so this was just not the one for me. I do have to say that the ending was refreshing though. It's not something that we see very often, and obviously I'm not going to spoil it, but I enjoy that. And I'm going to wrap up this video because I think it is quite long already, and so I'll leave the other books for another day. Know that I am still currently reading this one, but because it is so outside of my comfort zone, I don't want to force myself to read it and to read it fast because that might hinder my enjoyment of it. So I'll continue with my reading of it slowly but surely, and then I'll do a follow-up video and I'll update you on this one. I'm going to leave this for another video, another opportunity, another time, but I'll share my thoughts whenever I get to it. So let's wrap up the 3 books that I read for this vlog. So the first one I finished was The Empress of Salt and Fortune. I really enjoyed this one. This was very short in a fantasy setting that I felt needed a little bit more of a development, but because this is the first one in a series, I think there's a lot of potential for me to learn more about this world and sink my teeth more into this story and the mythology and all of that. I found the story to be compelling, not too much like wow, over the top new favorite, but it was an okay read, and I'll definitely be checking out the next one. Not a top priority, but I will be reading it someday. Then I finished Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi, and this was my favorite of the 3. The beginning was a little clunky for me, but this tells a story of a time-traveling cafe and its clients, its customers, people who go there, and their experiences and their lives. This is it's one of those very universal books. I was going to say it's not dramatic, it's just dramatic in the way that life is. You have a little bumps, but it's never too over the top. It's very realistic, apart from the time traveling thing, but it has a very sweet message, and I think everyone could benefit from reading this and everyone could possibly enjoy it. So I definitely recommend this one. And finally, La Petite Mort by Olivia Blake, which was my least favorite of the bunch. This is kind of urban fantasy. We have supernatural creatures. This is very fast-paced, a very quick read, but unfortunately it was just not for me. The relationships were not it for me. All in all, I think this was a fun video to film. I hope you enjoy it. If you have any recommendations for short books, leave them down below in the comments, please, so I can check them out and add them to my bookshelves and add them to my TBR. Please and thank you. And that's it for today. I'll see you next time. Bye!